mutation. It is the key to our evolution. It has enabled us to evolve from a single-celled organism into the dominant species on the planet. It is really quite cool. Where was I? Oh yes, I am Professor X. And let me say, isn't it weird that there are no mutants at my school who aren't sexy college co-eds with super cool powers? Screwy, right? I've got Wolverine, Jean Grey, Storm, and Gambit. My academy seems to be attended exclusively by runway models with kick-ass powers. Our chief enemies are ignorant bigotry and the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Who would you imagine is at the top of that team? Toad and some fat turd named, get this, the Blob. Magneto just surrounds himself with duffers so he can look elite. The mutation even provided humanity with this specimen. A middle-aged fat body that comments on video games that are older than Abraham's jock strap.
Hey!
Get upset on the internet, you're a salt adult, you're a salt adult. Get upset on the internet, you're a salt adult. Throwing out a hissy fit, your views ain't in the millions, and every up and comer is a threat to what you're dealing. And instead of getting better, you just spout up on your Facebook, crying on your Twitter bit about how bad your case look. In case you didn't get it yet, allow me to rephrase it. You're grandma than my 4-year-old, I'm actually amazed. Like you couldn't even see the forest for the trees. The writing's on the wall, literally there to see. How you getting salted, a culture blowing up, man? I think there was a point where you stopped growing up, man. Instead of showing up, man, irrationally mad. Don't appropriate impression like the latest fashion fad. It isn't cool or funny to be acting like an edgelord. You alienate friends, pushing closer to the edge more. I don't know how to say it anyway to make it clear. If you're the one unhappy, then the problem's in the mirror. Get upset on the internet, you're a salt adult, you're a salt adult. Get upset on the internet, you're a salt adult. The net is a repository for the vast expanses of human knowledge and all the technological advances. And I can't say enough how you gotta be open-minded. Yes, if you're looking for a fight, then you damn well find it. You got an axe needs grinding, you're not alone. There's a million other nerds who can bitch and moan and groan about how this a release date delay of the new game. Man, decrease the cliche of your neckbeard. I'm afeared of the intensity of your love for two characters. You claim I've got some chemistry and they belong.
Hi everybody, and welcome back to Retro Station 1989. I'm Commander Dan, and this is License to Play. This is where we review old licensed games, things that are based on stuff like breakfast cereals, soda pop, comics, movies, regular books, young adult novels, anthropomorphic animals who mess up your house. You know what? If it was licensed and it has a retro game made about it, we review it to tell you whether or not it has a license to play. And folks, it's superhero summer. And I gotta tell you, I'm pretty excited about the evaluations that we have coming up. In terms of hype, I'm fairly hype. I'm also hyped about the renovations coming up next week to the Retro Station, which will include modifications, I've heard, to the food distribution systems. You know, that means no more turnips, and no more turnip paste with turnip chunks, no more wild turnip surprise, no more turnip chili with turnips. In fact, Margot and Cambot have learned so many culinary techniques for turnips, it's insane. But when the only ingredients you have are water, turnips, and recycle water made from the urinal water, then everything tastes like turnips. Or turnips and water-flavored pee. You know what? Margot?
Commander.
Please note this priority request. No replicated asparagus.
Affirmative, Commander.
Ever.
Affirmative, Commander.
Like our opening pre-roll hinted at, this week we're talking about mutant superheroes, and we're talking about the mutants during the greatest, most influential period they ever went through. Well, possibly. The 90s. Marvel's X-Men is a comic that originated in 1963, and featured a new type of superpowered hero, the mutant. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby wanted to have heroes with inborn powers, a theme that Jack Kirby clung to throughout his career. From the New Gods to Darkseid, having like an inherited power set was something that Jack Kirby was really fascinated by. Now, the mutants were one of those types of heroes that were new and feared by the rest of society, and Stan Lee thought that was pretty cool because of the revolution in biology that the mutant represented. That was pretty heady stuff, even for the 60s. The original lineup were teenagers and college-age kids, led by Charles Xavier, a professor. These kids were codenamed Cyclops, Iceman, Beast, Angel, and Jean Grey was Marvel Girl. And though they had a certain cult appeal, the comic was threatened with cancellation in 1970, when one of the probably 5 most famous comics in the history of the medium came out, Giant-Sized X-Men #1, which featured what many would consider the classic version of the team: Colossus, Nightcrawler, Storm, Wolverine, and Cyclops, along with Thunderbird, who died in that issue, which set up kind of the theme of mutant heroes in the Marvel Universe dying in their first outing, or just dying altogether. That'd be mimicked to a certain extent in the 97 cartoon series with, and this is a spoiler for a 30-year-old cartoon, the death of Morph. Tackling subjects like racism, including anti-Semitism, religious extremism, and bigotry, along with legendary artwork by Jim Lee and Mark Silvestri, along with John Byrne and so many others, the stories woven about these marvelous mutants made them a mainstay of the comics, and were the big gamble that Marvel took on making full-fledged, super-powered movies in 2000. Up until that point, let's just say Marvel movies were kind of goofy affairs. I mean, look at this. That's Captain America with ears glued to his frickin' helmet. Okay? Now, they'd announced a lot of movies, Spider-Man and whatnot, but that was a canon film, and again, here's the Punisher. In the majority of this movie, he doesn't use guns. He prefers knives. It's just ridiculous. It is ridiculous, these movies. Then came Blade, beautiful movie, and then X-Men. And talk about licensed video games? Well, we know this. The X-Men have been featured in dozens of video games, from PC games to smaller 8-bit personal computer games, 8-bit system games, and more and more and more, and they range from the abysmal to the divine. And I've talked about some of the worthless ones. And there are worse than those, if you can believe it. Whoo boy. If you've watched my show, you know that licensed video games are almost always hit or miss. Black or white. They're either wonderful examples of video gaming and relate to the actual material perfectly, or they're crap. Utter crap. Crushingly, wretchedly garbage. Things on the Super Nintendo or NES, like Uncanny X-Men. Uncannily wretched men. That is not a game. It's horrible. You know, to the passable Wolverine on the NES, or to honestly a guilty pleasure of mine, X-Men and Spider-Man in Arcade's Revenge. Now, there's also the masterful, and that's Mutant Apocalypse on SNES, which we'll talk about again another time. But Nintendo didn't corner the market on the mutants. Oh no. Sega also dipped their toe into those waters, and you know what? Here's what they came up with. X-Men for the Sega Genesis. Alright, let's take a look back at 1993. Hammer Pants, Vanilla Ice, Street Fighter II, and in my gaming world, I was stoked. My buddy Adrian invited us over to his house, and he showed what he'd gotten for Christmas that year. It was a Sega CD system. Model 1, big chunky dude with the front-loading CD drawer and all the sweet sample pack in games you'd like. Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, and all the others so long as you didn't want Sonic the Hedgehog, that is. Now, I know games like Sewer Shark are sniffed at these days, but when we played it, I'd never seen video used like that outside of an experimental game in an arcade, so seeing one at a home on a TV blew my mind into a million frickin' pieces. At that point, one overriding thought came over me and obsessed me. Not, where will I begin to go to college next year, or what will my life be like away from my family for so long, or anything else, because the only thing on my mind was, how in the hell do I get me one of those things and get to the next level of gaming? So first things first, Christmas had already come and gone, so there's no chance of that, and I didn't want to wait. April, my birth month, was pretty far away, so no getting it as a gift until next year. I'd have to face the horrors of getting a job. So I got a job working for a clown burger joint who will remain nameless, but it will forever haunt my nightmares as one of the worst jobs I've ever had. Now, I didn't own a Genesis at the time, but I seriously wanted one after playing Sonic 2 and the Sega CD. That was the clincher. So I went to work. I worked a total of 17 days for the Burger Clown, and the second I got my first paycheck,
you're cool, and you, I'm out.
I handed over my apron and uniform, flipped them off, and walked out a free man with plenty of cash, and I vowed never to work fast food again. That vow was broken later that summer when I went to work for Disney, but that was only for selling ice cream, and it was only for one season. However, more importantly than all that, I had a Sega Genesis and a Sega CD system. And in March of that year, I owned X-Men for the Sega Genesis. Most of the time, I rented from the Blockbuster I ended up working at for 3 years following, since they did rent SCD games, and I played all sorts of games for the system. I was very fond of the Sega CD and the Genesis, truth be told. But from March forward, I had to play as Wolverine. I had to play X-Men. This is X-Men for the Sega Genesis. Now, I recently reacquired a copy at the Midwest Gaming Classic last year. It was published by SEGA of America, and it...
Commander Dan, we will be receiving a message from Planet X Resource Control. As requested, I am giving you a quote heads up unquote to quote stop all the silly expletive deleted interruptions on this here space station unquote.
Thanks, Margot. You know, I think that instead of avoiding interruptions, I've merely just scheduled them to come at me in a more evenly patterned pace instead. I'm not very bright, am I?
You have given strict orders for the crew not to agree with that rhetorical question at any point, Commander.
Anyway, let's take a look at the making of and evaluate X-Men for the Sega Genesis. So Sega of America worked with Western Technologies to create a number of games for both the Mega Drive in the UK and the Sega Genesis, including one of my absolute favorites on the system, Spider-Man. Not the original one, Spider-Man versus the Kingpin, the one from 1994 based on the cartoon. It's just a great game. They also developed Joe Montana's Sports Talk Football, which I also happen to like and still own. Joe Montana's football game was fun to play, and I happen to like the novelty of speech in the game. It wasn't quality speech, but it was good, and it had enough variety to keep you watching. But I did like that game, even though I don't like many sports games. Western Technologies' chief engineer and director was Bruce Staley, who went on to work with Naughty Dog on The Last of Us and the Uncharted series in modern times. The X-Men cartoon was already popular, and the Saturday mornings were just filled with licensed materials for Genesis gamers. We're looking at The Tick, Power Rangers, Ren and Stimpy, Marstu, Martin Salami, whatever the fuck this thing is.
It's Marsupilami, Commander.
Fine, whatever. Anyways, X-Men was developed over a year for the Genesis, in-house, and uses the GEMS sound chips within the system. You know what? If you have a Model 1 system in this game, the opening theme sounds blisteringly cool on headphones. So crank up that sucker, plug in your headphones, and get into it. Now let's talk the game. X-Men the game. First of all, the game features 4 playable mutants: Cyclops, Nightcrawler, Gambit, and Wolverine. And Wolverine is as fun to play as ever in any game in this one. Wolverine has his claws, which he can retract to activate his sort of slow healing factor, or go balls out, claws out, and shred all of your enemies. From Savage Land mutates to Sentinels to denizens of the Mojoverse. When I play, I favor Wolverine, of course, but honestly, the way the mutant power meters work is a breath of fresh air. No one is worthless in this game. Your powers regenerate over time, and the cost of using them doesn't prevent your characters from ever using their gifts like they do in the comics or on the cartoon. There's a little recharge period, but then there's the unwritten law of the X-Men, of course. No one wants to be Cyclops.
Professor, I do have...
The moment you were born, we should have cut your head off. You were a message from God that he doesn't love us, and we should have sent it back. Sign, seal, deliver, return to sender. Except if you were in heaven, it would be hell.
What are you going to do without me?
Probably cry myself to sleep every night with tears that don't harm anyone.
Oh, okay.
I don't even think Cyclops wants to be Cyclops. His I-beam could cure little dick energy and baldness, and people would still want to be Wolverine. There's just something about both of them that's easy to describe, just as a feeling about them. I think it's best said this way.
Cyclops reads Chicken Soup for the Soul books. Cyclops listens to Prairie Home Companion and loves it. I think Cyclops' favorite movie is some John Wayne film. He watches 60 Minutes every day.
He tries to be socially conscious.
He doesn't recycle or compost, though. I get the feeling he's kind of like a mid-level conservative. He drives a Prius, but not because it's gas mileage, not because it's environmentally friendly.
Yeah.
Wolverine has Logan in Gothic letters on the rear window of his car.
In the game, Cyclops has punches and jumps and I-beams. while kind of powerful, are just so boring. I mean, he's a boring guy. Check this out.
I think Cyclops likes Applebee's. I'll bet he shops at
Costco.
Brooks Brothers
But
he only
clothes.
gets the polos.
Yeah. He wears tidy whities.
He wears he wears cotton. He wears Fruit of the Loom cottons, and he wears Doc ciders.
What about Wolverine? Wolverine's silk. It's
No,
like,
Wolverine goes commando. I guarantee Wolverine goes commando. Guarantee.
okay, you're right.
Which is unfortunate. I mean, seriously, Cyclops' history is super interesting, but not for anything he does, honestly. His dad was abducted by aliens and started a super team in space called the Starjammers. His brother is Havoc. Super cool powers and awesome, but what a weird freaking costume. I don't even know what that egg whisk thing on his hat does for him, except distract people from his skin-tight Z-suit and his bulge where you can see his religion through his pants. I mean, Cyclops' girlfriend/wife, Jean Grey, is the object of everyone's affection from fandom and inside the universe, and could only be played by Famke Janssen in the movies. Cyclops sucks. Now, Nightcrawler in the game's got average strength, and his power is breaking the damn game. He can teleport all over. However, in two-player mode, his power becomes falling in every fucking pit and that exists in the game, and getting stuck in accessible areas where you're just going to have to wait for your friend to finally catch up with you. Not a great power. Single player, Gambit's great. His cards do a ton of damage. His staff gives him great reach advantage, and he's pretty nimble with his double jump. Overall, I mean, he's just as effective as our boy Wolvie, and if you're a Gambit person and not a Wolvie person, not a bad substitute for the old Weapon X. And if I'm being honest, Gambit's probably the best character in the game, overall. However, I just love Wolverine better. I can't help it. There's not enough plot in the game to get in the way of the story here. It's pretty straightforward. Magneto has sent a virus to the Danger Room system of the X-Mansion, pitting a lethal version of their VR training area against the X-Men to weaken them, or to kill them outright. As a player, you're going to face 5 Danger Room scenarios, culminating in a battle in the real world aboard Asteroid M against Magneto and his minions. So we start in the Savage Land. It's made up of 2 sub-levels. Sub-level 1 is a jungle, and you'll find yourself fighting Juggernaut at the end of that level. Wolverine is especially effective here, and the weak spot on Juggernaut is his helmet. So once you've cut that helmet off of him, using your backup X-Men is the key to defeating him at that point. The boss of the second area of the Savage Land is Zaladane. She's a supposed half-sister of the villain Polaris. She's a green magnet lady and a shaman of the Savage Land Sun people. I mean, this is a deep cut from the Marvel Universe, and I guess she's the boss because Khazar isn't a mutant, I suppose? I don't know. We could have fought Sauron, but as you can see in the first level, you ride Sauron like a goddamn skateboard, so he couldn't be the boss of anything. It's not a difficult boss fight, but it's kind of an annoying one. Just weather her blasts and use your invulnerability and fellow X-folk to just beat her down. The next level is the Shi'ar Empire, where you're going to face off with Shi'ar warriors, and it ends with a battle against Deathwing, the Shi'ar Empress's sister. Another battle where the boss can't be hit by normal punches unless she's standing on the ground. Use Cyclops or Gambit for an easy win. The levels are, well, honestly, the layout is traditional Genesis platforming, which is basically just an Amiga platforming game, but without having to collect a bunch of ridiculous crap to win. The remaining levels are rinse and repeat, with battles raging in the Danger Room's version of Excalibur's Lighthouse, a wild magical place where the X-Men's cast-off team resides, where you'll fight Juggernaut again, Sabretooth and Apocalypse, and I believe Black Tom. No lie, they throw a ton at you on that level. But beating Sabretooth is kind of a breeze when you know the secret, which is drawing him in by hopping on the platform you're on instead of jumping around, then wailing on him. Wolverine takes care of him pretty quick. Apocalypse is a tough fight, and it's probably in your best interest to grab a guide to figure the whole thing out. It's pretty complex. Then, it's on to the future world, the Days of Future Past world, where Ahab is the boss. It's an alternate future of the demented version of Cable, charged with hunting down mutants instead of protecting them. And he's the boss of the stage. Nightcrawler's power is useful to traverse the obstacles, the walls, and the infinite pits, but fighting Ahab is a struggle because of how fast that dude is. Again, get yourself some kind of guide, and you could probably get him after playing it once or twice. The next level is Mojoverse, and you face off with Mojo, the evil media producer who designs programs for space television that actually program the viewers. Mojo is the boss on this level, and using Gambit, you can glitch past his invulnerability with Gambit's normal staff hit combo. The end of this level, however, is notorious. Once you beat Mojo and the walking gun, You really need to physically reset your Genesis to end the level and then continue the game. The reason this is notorious? Well, aside from some emulators giving the game a hard reset, and you can do it that way, some don't have that. And for the handheld Nomad by Sega, it didn't have a reset button. Also, there's no real instruction to reset the actual Genesis, which led people to nearly pull their hair out in frustration over what the hell to do to finish this game. I mean, look at this poor bastard. The last level is Asteroid M, where you fight acolytes of Magneto and finally old Buckethead himself. The battle with Magneto is pretty intense, and he's super damn cheap, and if you weren't expecting his cheap assery, you would probably throw your Genesis into the river following the near-instant ball-kicking this game would give you, even on the easiest levels. But even with its retro difficulty and played-out level design, the characters to choose from, the sound, and the graphics overall are very representative of the 90s version of Marvel's main mutants, the X-Men. And while you'll ask yourself, who the hell wants to play as Cyclops anyway? Answer, no damn body. There's really only one important question about this game. Does X-Men on Sega Genesis have a license to play? Absolutely! Now, the game is double tough, no question about it, but with some perseverance and a little determination, you can start beating these levels and probably get yourself a walkthrough or two, and you'll have beaten this game and become the hero of a planet that fears and loathes you in no time. Now, we've got a new segment here on the Retro Station. It's called Viewer Mail. Our first letter comes from Connor in Partyville, Wisconsin. And Connor writes, Commander Dan, I want to be a space pirate. Very good, Connor. We all want to be space pirates. Can you take a look at new games like Paw Patrol? Well, yes, Connor, I absolutely can. In fact, during our back-to-school period after Superhero Summer, I'll be happy to take a look at Paw Patrol and maybe other games. And you know what? Thank you very much for the letter. If you out there want to also get your letter read here on the show, you can put it in a comment down below, or you can send it via YouTube messaging to me personally, Commander Dan here at the Retro Station. Now, before I forget, hey everybody, if you like what you saw, please subscribe and ring the bell so you know that I'm going to be putting up new videos sometime soon. But I got to tell you, what I'm really super excited about, no more turnips or turnip-based recipes. Yes! Folks, it looks like I got some good news here at the end after all. Anyways, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and send your mail and messages via YouTube. And you know what? More than anything I've said in the past, or during this broadcast, or will say in the future, remember to always, always, always stay retro. Peace.
Get upset on the internet. You're a salt adult. You're a salt adult. Get upset on the internet. You're a salt adult. Throwing out a hissy fit, your views ain't in the millions, and every up and comer is a threat to what you